Thank you. In 2000, I was diagnosed with stage 3 breast cancer. And after I got done with treatment, my oncologist told me, you have a 28% chance of living more than 10 years. Think about that. So I knew right away that I had a chance to use what time God gave me for good and noble purposes, to try and do the things that I always thought needed to be done in this country. And it's an important lesson for all of you. The greatest gift you have is not your bank account. Your greatest gift that you have is the amount of time you have left on this earth and what you do at that time. And I chose, for good or bad, to come to the United States Senate. I think when we have a world of options and we make this choice, it is so important that we come here with purpose, not just to be named a senator, not just for the trappings of office, but for purpose. So the truth is, I'm not supposed to be here. I'm from Matador, North Dakota. It's a town of 90 people. When I was growing up, my family was 1/10 population, I just have to say. And my dad was a World War II veteran who loved education, read the paper every day, believed in this country, but he was never given a chance to go to high school. My family struggled to get by, and when you look at it, you think about this. You think about a country where somebody from my background could actually become a United States Senator. I'm a Democrat from a very conservative state, but against all odds, in fact, prediction was, it was only 8%, I got elected to the Senate. And the fact that I got to serve in the Senate for 6 years is an incredible American story. People always ask me, at what point did you kind of think, wow, you came to the Senate? I said, I was so busy after I got elected because no one thought I would ever get elected. And so people wanted to see me who never wanted to see me during a campaign. And so busy taking meetings, busy putting together the office. And I remember the day I came to that chair. And the pastor came and he gavelled in. And then I turned around to say the Pledge of Allegiance. And I thought, here I am, Matador, North Dakota, a girl, middle-aged, pudgy Democrat from North Dakota. And I'm standing in the well of the Senate where not even 2,000 people have come before. This is a great and good and noble country with great purpose, with great opportunity. And I want every child out there to understand it doesn't matter. We represent a cross-section of this great country, but we also aren't that special. We're not. Sometimes I think the American public thinks if you took 100 random people and put them in the chairs, they could do better than we could do. But the truth is, you all came here with that same noble purpose. You all came here to change America, to do the right thing. And I don't care if you sit across there. I don't care if you sit here. You all came here for the right purpose. And so the fact I got to serve in the Senate is part of a great American story. And that story only happens in this country. Don't ever forget that. And if we lose that opportunity, we will become diminished in who we are. And so I want to today offer a few comments, and I hope they're not too preachy, but I want everyone to understand, especially my colleagues, that this has been the opportunity of a lifetime. But think about what we did to get here. This process that we go through is brutal and, quite honestly, obscene. It's obscene what we do to get here. So having done all that work, having taken those steps and walked that gauntlet of a campaign, we have an opportunity to not just achieve the title, but to do great and good things for this country. My job here, the work that I've done, has always been to remember who we're standing in this well for. Throughout my life and the past 6 years, I've stood here for North Dakota, for the incredible people that I serve. I've stood here for the families of disabled children who were terrified they would lose their health care. When I took that vote on the Affordable Care Act, I saw in that vote, I remembered their faces. I remembered their tears. I stood here for the men and women of our armed forces and our veterans in North Dakota who believe that they did a great thing and deserve to be treated respectfully, honorably, and yes, get the benefits that they've earned. And too often they're denied. A veteran should not have to come to a congressional office to get the benefits they've earned, but yet too many have to. I've stood here for retirees whose pensions are threatened. And I've asked a simple question. If we can spend billions bailing out the failed Wall Street bankers, can't we just pay attention to the working men and women who are struggling, who are in crisis, and literally the heartbreak of their stories, if heard across this chamber, the reaction would be overwhelming. Many of them are veterans. Many of them worked hard and now are broken in the work that they've done. I've stood here for farmers and rural communities, and I've stood here for Native people. And many times, as you know, have tried to do my best to educate all of you on the challenges of our first Americans, our Native Americans. But mostly I hope I've stood here for the children of America, because in spite of how we behave, they truly are our future. They are the people who make a difference for our future. And if we do not start respecting that challenge that we have to create a better world of more opportunity, we will not fix the problems of America long term. So these are the people who drive me every day. They are who we serve, not a party, not an ideology. We serve Americans. I've spent my time standing and fighting for them. And for me, that work will never, never stop. So with all that said, I stand here proud of what we've accomplished. When you look at the time and the opportunity to rise above partisanship and rancor, I have found so much common ground with so many members of this body. And I am incredibly proud of what we've been able to accomplish. I've advocated for Native American communities and my bill to stand up for Native American children, which I did with Lisa from the very beginning with Senator Murkowski, the first bill I introduced. And it was symbolic for me because we have to do better. And I found great partnerships with Lisa, not just on this, but on other issues. But I know her heart, and I know that she cares. And when you find people who care the way you care, you can do amazing things. My legislation to create an Amber Alert with our colleague John McCain in Indian country became law. We're on our way to passing Savannah's Act, which is going to recognize for the first time the challenge and the tragedy of missing and murdered Indigenous women. All of this so important. Bipartisan legislation to help crack down on human trafficking online. We shut down Backpage. We shut down people who were, in fact, selling children for sex. You think about that. That's a noble act that we took. And the challenge continues. Congress passed my bill to give first responders more training and resources to keep our communities strong and safe. I led a successful effort, again with my colleague from Alaska, Lisa Murkowski, to lift the age-old ban on exporting oil and pairing it with renewables that we did with my other colleagues on this side of the aisle when we looked at enhancing renewable energy. A flaming success on both sides. We are exporting literally millions of barrels of oil, resulting in energy independence and helping our allies, but we also are growing our renewable energy industry because of that effort. It didn't happen without colleagues working together. I secured a vet center in Grand Forks and a CBOC in Devil's Lake. Might be small to this body, but huge to the veterans it serves. I got needed funds for flood protection across North Dakota and projects that we need, working with Senator Hoeven. I passed my bill to secure the northern border, working with Kelly Ayotte, who is no longer here but a great friend. Legislation I helped write to provide relief to community banks. Senator Crapo, Senator Donnelly, Senator Tester, Senator Warner, recognizing the challenges of small lenders and how we needed to address those challenges. No one thought we could get that done, but we did, because we believed we could. Think about that. I worked with the Republicans and Democrats, probably the crowning achievement, together in terms of bipartisanship to deal with carbon capture. The first major piece of carbon legislation that's been passed since I've been here. I can't speak to other pieces. But how did that happen? It happened when Senator Barrasso and Senator Capito and I, and by the way, Senator Sheldon Whitehouse collaborated. and said, we can't agree on climate, but we will agree on development of technology that will change outcomes. This technology is absolutely essential to tackling the problems of carbon emissions in this country. So don't say it can't be done. If you can get Sheldon Whitehouse and Mitch McConnell on a bill that involves carbon and the coal industry, that's a good day here. That's a really good day here. And so I've worked to help to address detrimental impact exposure to trauma. And this is an issue I hope you all will become better educated on. Childhood trauma and the effect that it has on so many of our children. I worked with great colleagues, Dick Durbin, who actually let me take the ball and run with it, for which I will always be grateful. Worked with Cory Booker from New Jersey, doing incredible things for children. It is pivotal, if we're going to change outcomes for American families, that we begin to address why it is that we do everything that we've always done and we expect a different result. We have to think differently about these issues. I helped write and negotiate and pass 2 farm bills. Thank you, Pat. Thank you, Debbie, for believing in bipartisanship and believing in rural America. I've worked with incredible folks. I think John Bozeman from Arkansas, a great story. Little known fact in the farm bill that we're all going to pass is maybe the first piece of major legislation involving Cuba. We've lifted the ban on using the USDA programs to enhance export opportunities to the island of Cuba. First time we've addressed Cuba in any major piece of legislation. And yes, I don't know if Senator Carper's here, but I care about the post office. And you guys ought to too. We've ignored it way too long. I'm going to give you a shout out, Tom, and get everybody else interested, because I'm not going to be your partner anymore on the post office. But I want to, for those of you who care about politics, I want you to understand that when I made a post, Fix My Mail, thinking I'd get 20, 30 hits, in the little state of North Dakota, I got over 500 complaints about what was happening with rural postal delivery. If we can't run the post office, how can we run the country? I'll need to ask yourself that question. So I'm also incredibly proud of the stuff that I've done every day for North Dakotans. In 6 years, I've held over 3,400 meetings in North Dakota, both in Washington and with North Dakotans, both in Washington and North Dakota. My office has provided responses to over 204,000 North Dakotans who reached out to me on various issues. And my office has helped over 18,000 North Dakotans with federal agencies getting their VA benefits, fixing issues with Social Security, helping resolve immigration, and much, much more. People always ask me, what's your greatest achievement in the Senate? And I can go through all of the things I just talked about, but I like to talk about one thing. It's a Native American. He's from Spirit Lake Nation, and he is a pipe maker, which is a very ceremonial and honorable position within their culture. He's also a Korean War vet, and he was one of the first people on the peninsula. He was captured, injured, captured, and literally saved lives during what was called the Tiger Death March. He ended up serving the entire Korean War in a Korean concentration or prison camp. And so when he got out, no one knew who he was. There was no documentation of the fact that he was in the prison of war camp. There was no documentation that he had been injured. And Senator Dorgan was able to get him his POW medal. But guess what? He also didn't get his Purple Heart. And that bothered Andy, because he had served, and he had done incredible things in that service. And so we were able to find, scouring the earth, and found him in Texas, Mr. President. Somebody would sign an affidavit who said, yes, he had been injured. And when we presented that Purple Heart to that veteran, 86 years old, he got out of his wheelchair, he saluted the flag during the flag song, and he hugged his medal. You all have the power to do that. You all have the power to make just one little difference. Do that, and it's a great thing, even though it's not big legislation. So knowing that we are doing the work of the people, and knowing that so many North Dakotans have met with me and told me about incredible challenges that they have, incredible obstacles that they face, and that you can make a difference. You can help put food on their table. You can help them remain to be a family. You can help get them health care. You can do big things, but the little things matter too. The little things that affect each one of their lives. So despite all the progress we've made during some difficult times, we aren't done. Every day I come to the floor fighting for rural America. You know, there is a huge gap in productivity, a huge gap in economic viability. There is a huge gap, and as we see the retreat of rural America, we become less in this country. As we see more and more wealth moving to urban areas, we have to address this issue. And there are big clouds, I think, on the horizon facing this country in rural America. If Congress doesn't tackle them head on, our children and our grandchildren will suffer the consequences. And this is an urgency that takes center stage for me. I always said, the thing I wake up every morning thinking, what am I going to do about rural America today? You know why? Because I'm one of the few people here who does. That's because I represent a state that is still very rural. Even if you live in Fargo, I know it's not a big city to some of you, but it's a pretty big place to those of us in North Dakota. But even if you live in Fargo, you're just one generation from, Hillsborough. You're one generation from Cooperstown. So I also want to say that we cannot sustain record debt and deficit. This is a bipartisan challenge. This is a challenge of historic proportions. We are the only generation in America and in our history who has inherited from the greatest generation, our parents, and we are borrowing from our kids. Shame on us. Shame on what we are doing right now. The Congressional Budget Office has said our country's debt is headed to the highest level since World War I or World War II. These actions will have serious consequences, including increasing the chances of a fiscal crisis, which we can't ignore. I urge you to put fact before fantasy. Fact before fantasy. Open your eyes. See this challenge. Several months ago, when I voted against the tax bill that had greatly contributed, I think, to record deficits we now face, I ran into an older man after I'd given a speech at the Veterans Day service. And he came up to me, it was actually before the vote, and he came up to me and he said, Senator Heitkamp. I said, yes, sir. He said, I want a tax break. And I said, I hear that a lot. And he said, but not at the expense of my kids. He's still a patriot, that Vietnam veteran. He still knows what it means to sacrifice for the next generation. So the federal government needs to be responsible in how they spend their money. And I'm grateful that my friend James Langford's here, because we toiled away at energy, or at government efficiency. We toiled away to try and make, even in spite of our ideological differences many times, in spite of how we view our worldview on issues, we still believe that this government needs to be efficient. It needs to be effective. It needs to spend money the right way. And we marvel that no one seemed to care about it any more than just to show up for an occasional meeting. That work can't stop. And I hope you find an equal and willing partner in your work, Senator Langford, because I know your heart, and I know that for you, this is a moral imperative, to spend every dollar that gets sent here the right way, the most efficient way, and to do things right. And when we can tell the American public that we are spending their dollars responsibly, that we are making the right choices, we will have many, many more options, and we will grow the reputation, not only of the United States government, but of the United States Senate. Income disparity is at crisis, with more individuals and families getting left behind. The top 1% of families in America make more than 25 times what families make in the bottom 99%. Think about that. I'm going to repeat that. 25 times what families in the bottom 99% make. And much of the recent economic prosperity we've seen in this country has been concentrated on the coast, leaving much of rural America behind. The administrative trade war, not something I've been shy talking about, is causing an emergency in rural America, but I think it is going to cascade into a challenge, and it's going to domino into an economic peril for this country. I'm not saying that we don't need to address disparities, inequities, and trade agreements. I'm saying that you don't need a 17th century solution, which is called a tariff, to deal with the 21st century problem. You all have to take responsibility. Think about this. Think about the unilateral ability of the White House to impose a tax on the American people. And then, even more remarkably, to create a system over at the Department of Commerce to basically waive those taxes. How many of you would let the president decide who he's going to tax if it were income taxes, and then who he's going to waive? None of you would. Take responsibility. Congress needs to take back responsibility for tariffs before it's too late. And these markets took years to develop for agriculture. They are not going to come back at the snap of a finger. When you look at net farm income, it will be 13% lower in 2018, with no promise for an increase in net farm income in the future. This will cascade through rural America. I also want to sound the alarm, and it goes to Senator Blunt did, I think, a wonderful job, and I couldn't agree with him more, being the wife of a family physician who tells me every day that if he could only get his patients compliant with their hypertension, compliant with their diabetes, and the single biggest factor is behavior and mental health in that compliance. And it leads to challenges. And that challenge leads to despair, and that despair leads to a record rate of suicides. I don't know how many of you saw The Economist magazine did a big story on suicide throughout the world. Only one country is increasing, and that's the United States of America and the developed nations. And so according to the U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, the rate of death by suicide jumped 58% in North Dakota between 99 and 16. That's why we have made it a priority in my office to address those underpinning causes of death by suicide and the challenges that we confront in various pockets of our population, whether it's our veterans, whether it is Native Americans, whether it's young people, and now the growing rate of suicide among the elderly. Congress has to take steps, and there is bipartisan support for addressing mental and behavioral health and looking at comprehensive crisis of addiction. And can we just, as long as I got this soapbox and you're all listening to me, can we quit just talking about opioids? Can we start talking about methamphetamine? Can we start talking about alcohol? Can we start talking about a culture of addiction and not just focused on the opioid addiction? It is the bright, shiny object that we always run to, but it is a cover story for a much bigger problem that we are not addressing in this country. And so please, please, face the addiction challenge head on and in a broader context. I also would not be me if I didn't talk about Indian country, facing dire challenges with poverty, abuse, and addiction. Far too many Americans fully understand the challenges in Indian country or the importance of tribal sovereignty, treaty rights, and cultural heritage. I've worked to educate many in this chamber about those challenges, along with my colleague, Lisa. I've also talked about the challenges of runaway and missing people with my colleague, Susan Collins, who has been a great partner on so many things that I've done. And I think that when you find people of like heart and like commitment, we can do amazing and good things for the American public. But we all need to understand that the first people, our first Americans, should not be the last Americans. They should not be ignored. And when you have a unique position here, given that your government, the United States government, tried to sign treaty and sovereignty rights. So when you look at the disparities, you can't believe that we've done right by the treaties. And finally, I want to talk about the crisis of childhood trauma, which I've already addressed. But just to give you some numbers, and they may be things that you haven't thought about. According to a Justice Department study, 58% of all American children have witnessed or have been a crime victim in 2014. Traumatic experiences like abuse, neglect, witnessing crimes, parental conflict can lead to ongoing severe mental and behavioral health complications. For Native children, these are that much more prevalent. So when we look at the challenges ahead, there are larger issues for Congress to confront. Members of Congress can't just look for a quick win to talk about in their states without taking into account the long-term consequences of their actions. We need to look up, and we need to look bigger, so that Congress is creating a solid future for our children and our grandchildren. If we do nothing, if we do nothing else in this chamber, that would be an important first step. Everyone in Congress makes their own decisions about how you want to use your time. And it can come down to a few simple questions. Do you want to solve problems or not? Do you want to do right by your children and your grandchildren? And that means all of our children and our grandchildren. Do you want to win a re-election at no matter what the cost? Do you want to be able to look yourself in the mirror and say, I did good today? I implore those still serving and those about to join this chamber to seriously examine those questions. And I hope that you will take up this mantle of the important needed priorities. For many of you, all of those priorities are the same. In fact, I thought we should do an experiment. One Tuesday, I challenge you, you have the Democratic caucus in their lunch give a list of the 10 problems that America confronts that they want to solve, and have the Republican conference do the same thing. And I would just bet you that if you match those two lists, they'd look pretty similar. In fact, they'd probably be identical. And so when the American public sees that you know the problem, but yet you can't find the will to solve the problem, then they become understandably discouraged. So my work isn't done, and I will continue to do this work from a different vantage point. So as you soon start work in the next Congress with all these challenges, please consider a few things. The Senate only works if we enable it to. That means each of us need to do our job, and we may not always agree, but I know senators can work together, as I have, to get results. And I know that gridlock and partisanship does not have to rule the day. I've seen it firsthand. And as long as, again, a little ad lib here, I also think that you as senators need to take power back from leadership. Too often leadership determines the agenda. We should determine the agenda. And so I've seen it firsthand. I've seen that we can come together and solve problems, whether it's on climate change advocates along with climate deniers coming together on a carbon bill. If that is an indicator that Congress can function, I don't know what is. But it took political courage on both sides, particularly with my colleague from Rhode Island. So I don't believe that this country or the caucus is as divided as it seems. All of us, those serving in Congress and across the country, want our people to get a good education. They want affordable, quality health care, a good job that puts food on the table, retirement security. They want all those things that build an economy, which is the foundation. It is the bedrock of the might of this country, is our economy. People will point to the military. The military cannot exist without an economic, the economic strength of this country. But I think too often politicians create and profit from dividing us. It's the only profession where people are rewarded for blocking things from getting done. Think about that. It's no wonder the American public has such little faith. I have a novel idea since I joined this chamber. I've been determined to get results and put my state first, above political party. And there are many around here on both sides of the aisle who know how to get results too. And I encourage them to speak loudly, work clearly, seek compromise, and continue to do great and good works. And I hope more senators will join them. We also need more political courage in Congress. We need members of Congress who are willing to take tough votes because it's the right thing to do, even if it puts their re-election in jeopardy. We need more members who are not too scared to stand up when someone in their party uses fear and lies to win support. There's a fine line between representing those you serve and being representative of them. They don't always align. It's why we need to use facts and judgment, not polls, to make our decisions. And then it's up to each of us to explain those decisions. Simply put, sometimes leaders are needed to move public opinion to the right side of history. Remember, the decisions you are making, especially on big policy, will have consequences well beyond today. You know, I want to tell you about a Native American principle. It's called 7 Generations, and it urges decision-making in any way to look at how the current decisions that are made in this generation will affect 7 generations, the next 7, and to think about how you can look to a much broader purpose. I had a thing that I did in my office when people would come in and they would have the issue of the day. I said, look up. What is on the horizon? Debt and deficit, a looming retirement crisis, a crisis in education, a crisis in addiction. Look up. What are we supposed to do? Crisis in infrastructure, in healthcare. Look up. What do we need to do today that 7 generations people will look back? And don't worry about a public opinion poll, because you're making decisions not for just those people today. You're making decisions for the next 7 generations, and they have to be the right decisions. So all of you know that you are better than the outcomes of Congress. You are nobler than the petty rhetoric that is bantered about here every day. Your reputation, importantly, is tied to the reputation of every other member, because we have no power independent of each other. The greatest power that we have is the collective power of the United States Senate. The success of your colleagues is your success. And when great and hard things are done, you share in the satisfaction of a job well done. It's been true honor and privilege to serve as a member of this chamber and contributing to helping North Dakota and our country. And I'm grateful for that wonderful opportunity. Over the last 6 years, I've made amazing friendships with all of you, and I can't talk about it now because it's too hard, but I want you to keep fighting for those shared dreams, those dreams you shared with me, for those ideas that you had that will move this country forward. I want you to continue to dream and continue to believe. When I came here, I once came to a member and I said, I have this really great idea. And I told him about it, and he said, yeah, that's a really good idea. Well, I said, let's work on it. He said, well, it'll never happen. And I said, well, it's a good idea, right? Yeah, it's a really good idea, but it'll never happen. And I said, we have to get out of the shared culture of failure, believing it can't happen. It can happen. We can do really big and great things when we believe we can, and when we refuse to accept failure, when we refuse to believe that we are somehow limited. No one's tying you. No one's limiting you. You're a United States Senator, and collectively, you will make a difference. So I want to just also thank other people. First is the Capitol Police. I jokingly, only it's not a joke, said some of my best friends here are Capitol Police. Some of the nicest people you're going to meet serve you in the dining room. Some of the greatest people are painting the walls out there. Say hello. Don't just walk by them. They serve you, and they're proud. They're proud of the work that they do. And so they are wonderful people, and I want to thank them for their friendship. I want to thank so many more who cared about this place. I also want to thank my staff, which are all here. Many of them are amazing people, and they're going to go on to do amazing things. I have a thing that I sign when I sign things. I say, go do great and good things. You can do great things. They may not be good things. We've seen that throughout history. Go do great and good things, and they will. They are amazing. They've given so much, and I know you all think that you have the best staff. Unfortunately, I do. And a lot of them, are available. Just want to say. So I want them to take what they've learned into their future endeavors. And I want to make sure that the legacy that we leave is a legacy of service, of who we serve, who we stand for. Finally, I want to thank my family, my husband, Darwin, who's toiling in the clinic as we speak, my daughter, Alethea, and my son, Nathan, my 6 brothers and sisters, who are fairly famous all across North Dakota. I would like to just say they have been my rock. Finally, I want to thank my mom and dad, because they taught me and my siblings to stand up for what's right, to have our voices heard. And I know they're watching me from above, and I want to thank them for raising a rowdy, boisterous, and determined crew who remain each other's best friends. My mother and my father made us strong, and I hope that I have made them proud. I yield the floor.